Jeremiah Johnson is a computer musician and artist based in Brooklyn. His work explores the politics of appropriation, failure, and the tension between order and chaos through creative myths, in parentheses, uses of computer electronics and elements of early internet vernacular. He's the founder of 8-Bit People's Low-Tech AV Collective, member of the Computers Club Drawing Society and Phone Arts, and a co-curator of the Blip Festival, an event taking place annually in New York, Tokyo, and Melbourne. His installations, talks, and performances have been presented internationally at venues such as iBeam Art and Technology Center, the Museum of the Moving Image, and IMAL, Center for Digital Cultures and Technologies, among others. Please join me in welcoming Jeremiah Johnson.
Thanks, guys. So thanks to you guys for coming out to watch this telepresent talk that I'm going to give. And thanks, Jordan, for inviting me. I thought that I would just start sort of from the beginning and talk about where things started for me creatively. So in 1999, I was a freshman at Columbia University, and I began working on electronic music around that time. MP3s were sort of just starting to become really popular in terms of a format for digitally distributing music, and I was away from, I was living out on my own outside of my parents' house for the first time in my life. I had a high-speed internet connection. I had no parental supervision, so I was staying up really late, downloading audio software, and started making music. I had some other friends that I had been in contact with through America Online when I was in high school who were interested in electronic music as well, and one of them was my good friend Mike Hanlon from Detroit, and together we basically started 8-Bit Peoples, which is, as Jordan mentioned in the introduction, it's a low-tech audiovisual collective. So how that manifested itself was basically, I mean, we put together a simple website. It was running on a web server that was on my desktop in my dorm room. And we just started writing music and releasing it through the website, just as downloadable MP3 links. And early on, I think we were actually using mp3.com to host the tracks. I don't know if anyone remembers it. A couple years later, we moved to actually hosting these things ourselves. From that point on, I started meeting a lot of other people that were interested in writing this type of electronic music, specifically electronic music that either aesthetically referenced the music of early home computers and video game consoles, or actually used that type of hardware in the production of the music. And through meeting those people, whether it be online through chat rooms, IRC channels, bulletin boards, web forums, or out in the sort of real world when performing live shows, started to sort of build up a network of these musicians, and it was definitely the live performance aspect that started to solidify some of these relationships and make it feel like you were part of a community of musicians that were really doing something all together. So as the years went on, I started to get closer and closer with some of the New York musicians, specifically Josh Davis, who performs under the name Bitshifter, and Richard Caraballo, who performs under the name Minus Baby. And there were others as well, Glowmag and Bubbly Fish and Mark DiNardo. And all of these guys started putting together shows in New York on a pretty regular basis. And and we started performing together, and that sort of grew and grew. And out of this came something called Blip Festival, which is this is an annual music festival based around this type of music, type of electronic music called chip music. And as I mentioned, this is a type of music that is made using the actual hardware from the sort of early generation home computers and video game consoles, or really just produced to sound as if it was made using that type of hardware. So talking about simple square wave synthesis and white noise to create percussion, low bit samples, sort of a very dirty digital sound to it. And I guess I can just give you guys. So here's an old Nintendo Game Boy. This is what I made. Most of the music I've produced in the last 13 years, I guess, has been produced on this and this alone. And you can get these cartridges that are flash memory cartridges. You hook them up to your computer. You put software on them that, instead of being a game when you turn it on, you're greeted with basically an interface for synthesizing and sequencing music, and it's done all completely on the Game Boy itself using the D-pad and the A and B and select and start buttons. So obviously there are a lot of advantages to this, right? It gives you a self-contained environment in which to produce all your music. There's not a lot of distractions. Your whole studio is essentially right here in front of you. And when your studio is this small and battery powered, you can throw it in a bag and take it with you wherever you go. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Of course, there are also the technical limitations of it. So when you have only 4 channels of audio to work with, you have to really get to know the hardware as well as you can in order to produce music that's interesting, and learn sort of some techniques to trick the person or the people that are listening into hearing something maybe that sounds like it's more than what's actually there. A quick example of something like that would be, because you only have a total of 3 channels that are capable of producing melodic notes. So you have 2 channels that can produce square waves and one that can produce a sort of either low bit 4-bit sample waveform, or a user-defined drawn waveform, and then one white noise channel. If you want to play something like a chord with more than 3 notes, or 3 notes without using up all of the melodic channels, you can do something like playing an arpeggio of notes extremely fast in a loop way. So instead of the person that's listening hearing an arpeggio that's going through C, E, and G, they would actually sort of if you play that arpeggio fast enough, and you can because it's electronic music and it's the computer inside the Game Boy is able to sort of play through those notes at an extremely rapid rate. Those 3 notes sort of combine in order to give this sense of one sound that has C, E, and G in it. So that's one of the common techniques that's used a lot in chip music to sort of get more out of the hardware than what you actually would think is possible. So moving back to what I was talking about, the Blip Festival sort of was born out of 8-Bit Peoples and the increasing live performance aspect of the members of the chip music community. And what that is an annual music festival. We've done it here in New York. Starting in 2006, we've done festivals in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and then because of a switch in when we scheduled it during the calendar year, we skipped 2010 and did it in 2011, and then this year's will be taking place at the end of this month May 25th through 27th at Gramercy Theater here in New York. We've additionally been able to bring it abroad and make it into a sort of international event. We've done it in Tokyo several times. We've done it in Europe several times. And earlier this year, we did it in Australia for the first time. So that's sort of part of my practice, and where I started exploring these themes of appropriating hardware and sort of subverting intended uses of consumer electronics and technology in general. And I just want to say a little something about that, because when we talk about, so when I say something like subverting intended uses, a Game Boy or any sort of electronic video game console is in essence a computer. All right, it's no different really than the computer that we use, the computer that I'm using to Skype with you guys, for instance. You give it a set of instructions that are organized sequentially into something called a program, and it executes that program and does whatever you tell it to do. So in that sense, I'm not subverting any intended use of the hardware. When I say the intended use, what I refer more to is the fact that video game consoles are commercially marketed in a way that they're intended to be used to play games, and we're sort of supposed to not even realize that they're just computers in their heart, and in doing so, we say, okay, I'm buying this to use as a consumer, whatever content providers, the game development studios decide to develop and use for it. So taking this type of hardware, for instance, the Game Boy, and creating DIY software for it. You know, the guy that created the software I used on the Game Boy, his name's Johan Kotlinski, lives in Sweden, and he basically, from the ground up, wrote his own synthesis and sequencing software called Little Sound DJ, or LSDJ, for the Game Boy. And in doing so, he basically created a whole new use for this piece of hardware that people had not thought of using the Game Boy primarily as a musical instrument before that point. And of course, before that, there were many other instances of this happening in the demo scene, the Commodore 64 and the Atari computers, Apple II computer. All of these things were sort of, people repurposed them and started writing their own software so that they could use these for creative purposes. The thing that was different about the Game Boy is the fact that it really was a very ubiquitous platform worldwide. It was popular across North America, across Europe, in Asia. And this is something that set it apart from the other platforms that I previously mentioned. Additionally, it's quite cheap, and the technical barriers to entry were pretty low. You didn't need to get floppy disk drive or any sort of esoteric hardware to get it working. You just had to get a Game Boy, which you could usually find on eBay or at garage sales, and one of these flash cartridges, which were a little bit more difficult to come by, but if you knew the right places to look, they're not that to find. So that sort of set this movement, this chip music movement. It's like blew it up a little bit. That happened around the time that I was just starting to write electronic music. So going from there, talking again about live music performance, a big part of the live music performance is working along with visualists, often at music shows. So visualists or VJs, people that are providing a video accompaniment to the music you're performing. And the thing that's interesting about about the visuals that are provided at chip music shows is that usually the people doing that are adopting a similar approach to their work. They're usually working with these old pieces of hardware, and they're usually coding directly for the hardware themselves to produce real-time visuals that can then be used to complement the performance of the musician. And so it's always a collaboration with these DJs that are working at the shows. And so through that, I've had a lot of great experiences. I've met some good people as well. Don Miller, who's performed under the name No Character. He's developed a lot of software for the Nintendo Entertainment System to create visuals, and he's actually released a lot of that as open source software, the actual assembly code for it that people can take a look through, and in that sense, they can learn from what he's done already and build on it. As well as people like Paris Trentophiles, Tabor Roback, using modern hardware. I worked with him at Blip Festival recently, and I mean, there's a variety of others. But what it made me do was basically I became more and more interested in sort of developing the visual side of my work and sort of pushing out these same approaches to my music and same concepts and themes that I was exploring with my music, pushing those out into different media, more visual media. So I started, over the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I started doing a lot more work with, in a visual direction, so with digital graphics and net art. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about those sorts of projects. So one of the first things that I did was I started taking Nintendo Entertainment System games. I started sort of putting them up, opening up the code either in hex editors or decompiling and seeing, trying to see how the game worked, or opening them up in programs that let you sort of look at just the tables of graphic data that are in the game. And I started modifying games to give them some type of different context and sort of like cause people to look at the games in a new way. So one of the examples of this is a series of these game hacks that I did called Data Spills, and I guess actually I'm going to screen share for a second.
Successful.
Okay. So I started talking about a series of video game hacks that I did, and these were hacks that were based on the work of an artist named Lucio Fontana. I don't know if you guys are familiar. So he did these series of slash paintings that were essentially monochromatic canvases that he cut through and created these really beautiful works that I became really interested in because they sort of the slashes in the canvases became the sort of foreground elements of the work, even though what they were doing was rupturing the canvas and actually exposing the background of whatever was behind it. And I just loved it because it was such a simple gesture, but it had such a great impact, a great visual impact. So I started thinking about what it would look like if this was applied to a different media, such as video games, and so I started thinking about what is the foreground of, what is the sort of canvas, what is the foreground layer of a video game, and what is the background, what is behind the canvas. Looking at Nintendo games, it's actually, there's a very clear distinction between the two. because they're broken up into two memory chips in the cartridge. One contains all the graphics data and one contains all the program logic. So the game world, right, the video screen is the canvas when you play a game, and the program logic, the underlying rules of how you interact with that game world is really what's in the background, and you don't really see it except when it's manifested through the visuals. So I started opening up games in a hex editor and looking at this data for the graphics and the program logic side by side. And what I did is I began essentially cutting away sections of the graphics data so that the program logic could spill through into the visual realm and sort of rupture through that layer. And what this manifested as was a series of video game hacks that I called data spills. And so I took some of the more popular Nintendo games, Super Mario Brothers, Ice Hockey, Bubble Bobble, and I performed these operations of cutting away graphics data and letting the program logic spill out. And I guess we can actually just so let's see. Should I do this through screen sharing? All right. Well, there's actually a video clip on YouTube, so maybe you want to pull it up. Okay. So this is a page on my site about the Data Spills project, and so you can, if you want to just scroll through that page and just show some of the installation shots, and then you can play that video at the top. So can you bring the volume down a little bit also, Jordan? What's interesting about, sorry, mute the YouTube is what I actually meant, because there's going to be some audio that comes in again. But so what's interesting about this is that these games, when you modify them in this way, they remain completely playable, because you're not actually modifying the program logic, you're only modifying the graphics data. So what you end up with is this completely abstracted version of a game where what you're actually seeing is the program code coming out and being interpreted as if it's graphics, and what that results in is a lot of this sort of real sort of glitchy noise aesthetic that you see in here. I don't know which point in the video you guys are at, but I think the Super Mario Brothers one should be coming up shortly if it's not already. But what you see is these sort of like glitchy game worlds where you can still interact with them. And in watching people play these when it's been installed in gallery spaces, I was always really impressed by the fact that people were able to play them almost as easily as the unmodified versions of the games. And I don't know if that was because of a sort of prior knowledge to playing the game so often that they just knew the sort of rhythm of it, or if it was because of the fact that as a species, humans are really good at pattern recognition. So it takes a very short amount of sort of time to understand when you're using the controls what what you're actually controlling and what sort of interactions you can have with the game world. We can stop this video now and go back to talking about. I'll just show. I'm gonna do screen sharing for this one. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about another Nintendo game based work I did that was actually completely custom written hardware. Custom written software rather than a video game hack. And this is screen. All right, can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a project called Eat Shit that I worked on with together with Don Miller, and what this basically was a graphic of Johann Sebastian Bach and a short segment of his Minuet in G just playing, looping in the background. And it would just sort of run on a Nintendo with a projection or a monitor hooked up to it, and have this image when you walked up to it, and it had a single controller attached to it, and when you picked up the controller, anything you did with the controller, any button press, any sort of interaction you tried to have with it would just cause the graphics and the audio to begin to fall apart. So it would just introduce noise into the system, and so it was trying to just turn the typical mode of interaction on its head, and showing, sort of like casting you as this destroyer of the digital work, or a heckler of like this old form of music, like, you know, a sort of like classical composer that you're now just like, he's been just represented crudely on a screen, and you're just basically being cast in this role of a sort of destroyer of that history. And it was also just like a fun sort of like aggressive project to work on, in the sense that I just really enjoy the sort of punk, sort of like cyberpunk aesthetic of these crude graphics and raw digital sounds that then just like gradually fall apart. And so let's go back to you guys being able to see me. Okay. And I'm just going to wrap up with talking about a couple other things that I've been involved with recently. One is I've been doing a lot of sort of drawing on a computer screen lately, and one of the projects that I'm involved with is called Computers Club Drawing Society. And the Computers Club is basically a group of net artists and digital artists that all release their works through the site computersclub.org, and there are a lot of great artists involved in that project. And Drawing Society was an offshoot of that, in which these artists were given a set of tools that are Java-based drawing tools that you basically create all of the works within the web browser itself. And I was interested in that because it really played into the same sort of things that interested me in chip music, and that there's a specific set of technical limitations and a very sort of contained environment in which to work, and you have to give a lot of thought to figuring out how to accomplish the effects you want with a limited tool set. And so, if any of you are interested in that work, you can find it at www.computersclub.org, and then /draw, DRAW. And you can see there are a lot of people involved in the project, and it's updated almost every day with posts from the artists involved. Another one that I more recently started contributing to is called Phone Arts, and Phone Arts is located at www.phonearts.net. And what this is with the advent of smartphones and specifically the iPhone, there's a lot of drawing tools out there that let us take this sort of approach and this practice with us wherever we are, and allow a sort of drawing or painting process to be much more mobile and spontaneous. So having the ability to pull out your phone on the subway and begin drawing something, and then as soon as you come out of the subway, being able to just post it to Twitter, to Tumblr, to a website, that's something that's really sort of new and unique. And Phone Arts is based around this idea of creating original works entirely on the phone platform. And there's a lot of great people involved in that project as well, and it's been a lot of fun to work with. And again, it appealed to me for similar reasons. There's an inherent set of technical limitations to it, and it also, similar to what I was talking about, the Game Boy, being able to sort of take your whole studio in your pocket. You can always take your phone with you. I mean, we don't even have to think about putting it in our bags. It's always, our phones are almost always with us. And so it's something that you can just pull out at any time and create some new work with. And I think that I've probably talked for about as much time as I wanted to talk for. I wanna open it up now to any questions you guys have, and if there was anything that I talked about that you want me to clarify, or if there's anything that I didn't talk about that you're familiar with and you want to hear more on, just let me know. So thanks for listening, and yeah, let's open it up to questions. And here's the other thing, if anyone's nervous to ask a question over Skype, you can also tweet at me right now, and I'll answer your question. I'll see you on Twitter, and I'll answer your question. I'm at nullsleep, NULL sleep on Twitter.
Yeah, well, the camera's on that. So dark.
It's okay, I can see it.
I got a question. You said that you started making chips in like late 90s, correct?
Correct.
So you said that the major thing that actually got it was
I believe so, yeah.
how long did you play live there before
That's a really good question, and the answer really is, I think the answer is really geographically dependent, because there are places that I can play now that I still get that reaction. As far as within New York City, where these live performances were ongoing in a pretty semi-regular way for years and years, I would say probably, I don't know, I think I played my first show in 2001, and I would say probably took 2 or 3 years at least before people really began to get what was going on and stopped yelling out things like play Zelda or like play Tetris. Like, for years, yeah, for years, people saw you on stage with a Game Boy, and understandably so, they assumed you were just mixing music from video games that you had plugged into your Game Boy. And so it was interesting because a lot of those shows and performances for the first few years were really part performance, part concert and part like educational outreach to audiences to really help them understand what was going on. And a lot of the times I would just ignore those sorts of comments when they were yelled out. But other times I would grab the microphone and I would offer an explanation to them that this isn't what's going on up here. This isn't about video games. This is about using video game hardware to create original works of music. And we're not DJs, and we're not remixing video game soundtracks. What we're doing is we're repurposing this hardware to actually create original compositions and then perform them live. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, Andrew.
Hey there, Jeremiah. I'd have to say, everything you and Joshua Davis do for Ape Peoples is an inspiration. Just
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And I really, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the festival this year. But more to the point, as far as the evolution of your sound, starting with like her laser light eyes and early pieces like that were more like BGM.
Right.
I've seen like in the 2007, 2008 performances that you did. There was more of the collapsed desires style, and then seeing your more recent performances in Melbourne and Flip Tokyo. It was really exciting to see the progression of more of the data corruption and glitch and stuff kind of coming in. And then I really enjoyed Ein Soul. I don't even know how to
Oh,
say
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I was just wondering, as far as your exploration in music, with chill music and with glitch, just I don't know, with digital music,
Yeah.
do you see yourself going more in the direction like noise or like droning, or are you going to still keep with like the Depeche Mode, like Megamix awesomeness?
I think that there's basically the one thing that I want to do as a musician and as an artist is to constantly be moving forward. I want to be very aware of the possibility of getting stuck into sort of a certain sound and then just stagnating with it. And so I think that for me it was really important to move from the very sort of hyper melodic, upbeat type of music that I was producing early on as a musician, and start exploring a different direction. And it's also, these things, music and art for me are really a way of sort of expressing things that are going on in my life that aren't really communicated in other ways. And so I think that whatever I'm experiencing in my life is sort of going to dictate the direction that I take with my music and art. So there were times when things were sort of great for me, and that really like sort of manifests itself in one type of approach to music, and then life throws you some curveballs and things get tough for a while, and that sort of manifests in another way. But I do want to basically I just want to continue exploring different directions, and I think that it's also really fun to play with audience expectations when you have these different type of approaches to music, because when I first sort of transitioned from the melodic stuff to more industrial noise drone based music, I really got a lot of flack for it from the people that were coming to my shows, because they had my recorded music and expected one thing at the show, and then I gave them something completely different that was much more sort of aggressive and confrontational. And you know, you lose people that way, and you gain some people that way, and you have to. I think that I'd rather have a performance where there's a very strong reaction to what I'm doing, even if it's negative, than just someone just walking away saying like, "Oh, okay, that was exactly what I expected." I think that like performance should be surprising and should offer something outside of what you experience when you're just listening to a recording. So the next, you know, who knows what I might do next is like go all the way back in the opposite direction and release some type of like disco record. Yeah. You're welcome.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Um, I think that I'm getting sorry, Jordan, I'm getting a lot of slap back on the audio. Is it possible to turn it down slightly?
Wait. I'll just. Who's got an extra shirt? I'm just gonna put a shirt on top of the mic.
That's a great hack. I like it. Okay, can you guys still hear me? Okay. So I think that first of all, yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think you are picking up on the sort of the themes that are running through my work. I do think that actually my work is already, you can already see a sort of evolution of some of the things that I'm referencing, as there is a lot of that sort of early technology aesthetic and early sort of internet aesthetic in my work. But I think that especially with some of the works that I've done on phone arts, you can see these references to sort of more modern visual tropes and sort of default styles for graphical applications and graphical software. So, for instance, I think that like the Computers Club works that I'm doing are more rooted in earlier visual culture, like demo scene culture and sort of 1980s era graphics. And then as you go over to the phone art stuff, I think that a lot of the stuff that I've been working on in that realm is more related to sort of 90s visual graphics and a slightly more progressive style of graphics that were seen in that decade. And so I think that it's something that I'm interested in exploring, and I think that, I don't know, there's a possibility that I will always be referencing some continually evolving like earlier generation of graphics, because I think that there is something about when you're trying to figure out how to phrase this. When you're within a certain time, it's hard to see exactly what's going on until you have some distance from it. And once you do have some distance from it, you see it in a different light, and you're able, if you then work with those sort of within that style and within that sort of medium, but separated by time from it, you can actually get a different perspective on it, and you can you can sort of discover some new things about it that weren't really obvious when it was the work of the time, and I think that's why it's of interest to me.
All right, we have time for one more question. If somebody has one, come on up. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I think that different people are using phone arts in different ways, and so for some of the people, it really is just about the complete, like, spontaneous, productive um, aspect of it. The fact that you have your phone with you all at all times, and you can just basically scribble something out and upload it, and just throw it out and, like, be as prolific as possible with it. And it's not about um, it's not about quality as much as it is about, like, a sort of shotgun approach to creating art, and that you just, like, just blast a bunch of stuff out as fast as possible, and then, like, a certain percentage of that is going to be you're going to find something sort of beauty within the noise, and which I think is a completely, it's a valid approach, and it's an interesting approach to creating work. For me, I use phone arts a little bit differently, and I tend to spend longer periods on the compositions that I'm working on, and release them less often. So it's, rather than sitting down on a subway ride and, like, finishing something from start to from start to finish, and then just uploading it within, like, a 20-minute period. I'm taking that 20 minutes to just work on a piece, and then the next time I'm on the subway, I take another 20 minutes, and I sort of, like, put the work in over over a period of different trips, or breaks in my day. And so this, as far as the software that's being used, there's a number of, there's a ton of different graphic editing software for the iPhone. The ones that I've found are really common among the contributors to Phone Arts are a program called Art Studio, which is probably the closest thing to Photoshop on the iPhone. It has things like layers. It has things like filters, and ability to do color adjustment. There's also one called iTracer HD, which is that. So if you went through all of the phone art stuff, there are a couple pieces that I posted that are 3D scenes. And iTracer HD is basically a 3D modeling and rendering program that's runs completely on the iPhone, and so you're able to sort of create primitive 3D volumes, assign them materials, set up lighting of the scene, and then render the entire scene. Retrace the scene, and output a PNG image. The reason I've only done 2 of those is because it's extremely time intensive to do those 3D works on the iPhone, because it's basically like going back to the sort of speed at which 3D graphics were rendered in, like, 10 years ago on computers. Now it's first of all, it's amazing that we can do this kind of thing on something that fits in our pocket now. but it is a much slower process than if we were to do it on a desktop. So, so I guess you have to take these scenes, light them, then render them at a low quality, and what you get is you basically have to iterate this process many times, and because of the time involved in rendering, it's just incredibly time intensive. The third one I'd mention is called Art Rage, and this is an app that is really intended to simulate the sort of physicality of painting on the iPhone screen itself. So you get a lot of sort of built-in lighting effects that make it look like you're using actual paints, and the texture of the canvas is really prominent. And so I've been interested in taking that kind of aesthetic that's built into Art Rage, and then combining it with some of the elements of the other programs, and sort of creating these works that are hybrids of different approaches, different default aesthetic qualities, and it's just been a really fun project to be involved with. Yeah, thanks for the invitation to talk. I really had fun.
I'll send you a link in a couple days once it's chopped together. And yeah.
All right, sounds good. And just a quick shout out, if any of you are interested in checking out more of my work online, you can find my music at www.nullsleep.com, and my visual works at www.datacorruption.org.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks. Have a good day, guys.